One. All right, we're live. What's up, party people? It's your host, Sunny Ray, on the Building on Bitcoin show. Today I'm joined by Jesse Berger. Jesse, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Sonny. How are you, buddy?
I am well, a fellow Canadian, right? A fellow Torontonian, a fellow Bitcoiner, an author of the book called Magic Internet Money, a I don't even know what to call you, a savior in many ways during the COVID times, right? You were, like I was just saying earlier, maybe amongst one or two people that I knew during the height of, the hallucination that we were all going through to kind of like slap us out of our slumber. So, good on you on that. And then also, I guess, mo most newly, a Bitcoin mentor, right? So lots to talk about. So tell me, what's new? How's life?
Life is good, man. I got a little one running around the house here. I have a 1.5-year-old, so she's, keeping me busy, keeping me
Good.
smiling. And then working with Bitcoin Mentor is, yeah, like you said, it's sort of my most recent endeavor, and it's been fantastic. Bitcoiners, we never stop learning, and Bitcoin Mentor has really given me a chance, not only to up my game, but increase, or up my game of how I relay the message of what Bitcoin is, how it works, actually getting people's hands dirty with using hardware wallets, software wallets, nodes, whatever it may be, to get into the technology and really understand it better.
And you said you're working with BTC Sessions on that one?
So BTC Sessions co-founded Bitcoin Mentor.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, he's a pillar in the Canadian community, and so I
Oh
just
yeah.
went through your website as well. I mean, great work. Looks like you're working with Bull Bitcoin, CoinKite, Nunchucks, and all these guys. So
Yeah,
you're
they're all like partner companies. We sort of,
good.
refer or use their products.
You're in good company. Awesome,
Where
awesome.
I'd like to think so, yeah.
Again, we did do an interview a couple years ago, so I'll try and put that link in the show notes so people can check it out. So maybe we don't need the long version, but just for some context, maybe take us through kind of your before Bitcoin days. Was it true? Were you passionate about music back in the day, or did I? Yeah, were you a
No,
music
no, no.
guy?
That one wasn't me. I was a gold bug back in the day.
Okay, so how did you? So I remember you were in finance,
Yeah.
big time, and then you became an author. I thought maybe there was some other kind of like artistic pursuits in between, but tell maybe share with
I
us how you went from working in, I think, one of the big banks or something, all the way over to like Bitcoin land.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would say I've always had a flair for the arts or an understanding or appreciation of the arts, and I think I tried to make it visible in my book cover, which I designed here.
Beautiful.
Um, but yeah, I worked in banking, retail banking and wealth management, and basically during the financial crisis, I got woken up to the chicanery of the fiat financial system and what a scam it is. At first, I became a gold bug because at the time, Bitcoin, it wasn't even around. This was in 2007, 2008. So I became a gold bug. Bitcoin came out, 2009. Obviously, it was the Genesis block, January 2009. I probably heard about it in 2010 or 2011 and through Max Kaiser on his old TV show, and I thought it was very interesting. I appreciated three aspects of Bitcoin right out the gate: um, fixed limit, 21 million coins, predetermined monetary policy slash issuance schedule, and no free money. Like coins had to be mined. You couldn't just control copy, copy pasta, and boom, you create new money like you do with fiat. So I appreciated the monetary aspect because I studied it from the gold perspective. Um, and I was interested, but basically I didn't really start buying or learning a lot about Bitcoin until 2017 when the whole sort of ICO boom happened. And I got initially sucked down the crypto rabbit hole and shot out the other end as a Bitcoin maximalist a year later. But yeah, worked in retail banking, worked in wealth management. I was just a stock trader for high net worth individuals or stock, operator, as Jesse Livermore would say, for high net worth individuals. Basically, just throwing darts at a board, guessing at what stocks to buy for people, because that's all I think they really did at the end of the day.
So you
Um,
obviously bleed orange now, right? And you're writing books about it, you're mentoring
yeah.
people about it. But I love to capture kind of like before you got into Bitcoin. So what was your like worldview when it came to financial system, centralized institutions? Did you not even like kind of question it, or were you getting inklings? Like were you picking up on the Occupy Wall Street, Ron Paul? Like were things kind of starting to find its way into your worldview a little
Yes.
bit?
So let's go back even further. End of high school, which for me was 2002. I put a quote in my high school textbook from Mark Twain. I never let my schooling interfere with my education, is the quote. And so I would say that intuitively,
That's a good
I
one.
always knew that, I was being propagandized to a degree, and there were some things that were useful in quote formal education and some things that were not. And I could sort of see and tell the difference intuitively without really being able to put a formal argument or understanding about like what and why that was the case. Um, and I was sort of a zombie through university. I was not a particularly good student studying economics and philosophy, although I picked two very different and interesting topics that later would come together to help form my understanding of Bitcoin, because economics and philosophy both factor into that. But yeah, I was like a zombie through undergrad and university. And then when the financial crisis hit, basically I had a friend of mine come to me and say like, "Hey, have you seen this? Did you ever see the Peter Schiff was right video? This like YouTube video. It was like a 7 or 8 minute YouTube video of clips
I,
of Peter Schiff on CNBC and Fox News and it's whatever from 2006 to 2008, where he's just like calling it like dominoes, just every single domino that got knocked over during the financial crisis. And it's amazing because I was a junior banker at the time that didn't know anything and thinking, oh, nobody saw this global financial crisis coming. And my buddy shows me this video, and I was like, wait, someone actually understood how and why this happened and predicted it and was warning people about it. Like, I should pay attention to this man. And so that got me like Peter Schiff led me to Ron Paul and libertarianism. So I became like an Austrian economist, Austrian economist, libertarian type. And yeah, that's ultimately how I became a gold bug and sort of woke me up to those thoughts that I had had during high school, but I couldn't really formalize. And now I started to have put a better understanding of, oh, like everything is sort of these systems, and these systems are designed to keep us in our lanes, so to speak, right? Like we can't deviate too far. You can't debate outside of these predetermined boundaries. And it's like, well, that's not what, a flourishing humanity is all about. Like we need to be able to explore and expand our horizons to get to real answers about the things that are going on in life. And so those were sort of the formative years for me was like 2007 to 2010, 2011 were like really formative in my understanding of the world. And that's what led me to, really accept Bitcoin. And then again, like you said, became an author in 2020, I published a book, but I started working on it in 2019 where I would, let my understanding combine with my interest in the arts, you could say, and my way for wanting to explain things and lay out arguments and really help people understand what this Bitcoin thing was all about. So that all sort of came together. Um, it culminated with the book in 2020, but the whole process started basically at the tail end of the financial crisis.
the number of people that tell me a very similar story, like the whole, a lot of people start with Occupy Wall Street. I think, if I'm not
I
mistaken, Peter Schiff was making rounds like within that community,
it,
like doing
and it,
videos and trying to kind of put the counter argument forward, right? Do you remember
Yeah, we
those?
we had an Occupy Wall Street in Toronto. It was
Right,
like 5 minutes from my condo, or
right.
my apartment where I lived when I was working in as an investment advisor. And I'd walk through it on the way home sometimes. And just, I'd have a couple chats with people, but like I was maybe a little too timid about really getting in there and getting too nitty-gritty with what was going on there. I was just sort of watching from the perimeter, I'd say.
I similarly attribute a lot of my ability to grasp the concept of Bitcoin to Dr. Ron Paul and, just being obsessed with him for like a couple years. I remember being
Yeah,
at one
I
of his
have I have a
Texas
couple of his
rallies. Oh, do
books
you?
behind me
Like
there,
a
yeah.
lot of people don't know. He's a doctor. He's delivered over 4,000 babies. I mean, a gold bug, ran for president. The guy's something else.
I
I did end up finally meeting him at like a Satoshi roundtable many years later. But it took him some time, no? It took him, I mean, I guess it takes everyone a bit of time, but it seems like gold bugs, they get stuck at some point or
But
another.
to Dr. Paul's credit,
Yeah.
he was always of the opinion that we should have competing currencies. He was never opposed to
Mm,
Bitcoin, to the best of my knowledge.
good
He may
point.
not have fully grasped it, but his approach, again, if I were to name my top 10 politicians, it's of all time who I think, have
Mm.
principle and would do the best for humanity. It's Ron Paul and then nobody, 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 right? Like, like it's just like Ron Paul's the GOAT. and there's no second best. Because he's just a man of principle and understanding, and he's open-minded. But yeah, he, always preached competing currencies. We don't have to mandate this currency or that currency, but we should not, and like we should not mandate currencies, and that's why the US dollar legal tender is problematic. Let currencies float against each other, let them compete, and may the best currency win. And that's why we think Bitcoin will win at the end of the day because it's just the best.
Yeah, Jesse, do you remember BitTorrent? Do you remember LimeWire? Are you old enough
Yep.
for those
Yeah, yeah.
days?
I used
So
both.
had you brushed up against this concept of decentralization and perhaps subversing, these large like power structures in
See,
some way?
that's the aspect of Bitcoin that I did not understand in 2011, let's say. In 2011, I understood the monetary and like economic angle. That made sense to me, but I didn't understand decentralization, the sort of technology, software engineering, how all that worked. And it wasn't until, between 2018 and 2020 when I really put all the puzzle pieces together that it really started to make sense to me. And I started to figure that part out. Sonia, I can't hear you. I think you muted
Oh
yourself.
shit. And then, again, before we get to like the Bitcoin aha moment and all that, what about your creative journey? Like, was that sparked by Bitcoin, or had you always been kind of down? Because I mean, becoming a writer, I assume, is not, a trivial pursuit. It
It
takes
it
courage, it takes, clarity of thought. I mean, how did you come about that world?
Yeah, I'd always had a creative streak to me. But I would say I probably kept it kind of dormant or trapped because I was always a little lost and unsure what I should do with my life and my career. And so I sort of followed what seemed like a proper formula or just taking steps that seemed like I was advancing and progressing and would make more money, right? Like that's what I was trying to do. And I wasn't doing what I thought was best. I would think what maybe other people or family or just the perception of me would be, what would be best from that perspective. And so I did myself wrong in that sense. And I've acknowledged that now. I wish I had a better knowledge of myself to have pursued the things I truly cared about earlier in life. And obviously, I'd encourage people if you're younger and it's not easy. Not everyone has the resources to do it, but like if you can, pursue what resonates best with you. So I always had that creative streak kind of in me, but I suppressed it. And then Bitcoin, it's not that, I mean, in part, Bitcoin sparked it, but it also gave me the freedom to discover it. Because,
Hmm.
okay,
Hmm.
I had Bitcoin gave me the sort of financial flexibility, purchasing power. I had this runway of time where I thought, okay, I can do things and I don't have to be beholden to others and I can just do things for myself. Um, and what I wanted to do was just at that time anyway, was I need to help people understand Bitcoin. And the only way, I didn't set out to write a book when I was thinking I wanted to help people understand Bitcoin. There's a whole backstory with that. I don't want to go into it at the moment because it's a little bit of a longer story. But basically, I wrote a book by accident, but I leaned on all those creative elements that sort of were in me. And it was like once I decided I was going to write the book, I literally thought of nothing else for a year. I was just so mission driven on I need to get this out and it has to be the highest caliber it can be. And for those that are not familiar with my book, I spent a lot of time condensing arguments so that Bitcoin, again, is multidisciplinary. You have to tie a number of different disciplines together and form an understanding. You can't just take one element and have a clear picture of Bitcoin. And so I wanted to, weave together multiple disciplines in the simplest and friendliest language possible, but also just make it like short, which again, for a complex subject matter was really difficult. So I spent so much time, I must have written 5 times more than I actually published in the book. And I spent a lot of time, A, getting rid of content, but then B, like editing the language so that it would be super friendly and relatable and easy for just literally, I wanted my grandmother to pick up the book and be able to read it and come away thinking, okay, like I kind of get it. You don't have to understand everything there is about Bitcoin from reading my book, but oh, like there's a reason for this to exist, and there's context and history, and you have these different angles, and they all kind of work together, and that's all you need to understand from my book. I mean, I think there's more to understand from my book, but at least you can come away thinking, yeah, this Bitcoin isn't just magic money on the internet that people are believing in for no good reason. Like there's a real reason for this, and it provides real value and utility to people. Anyway, sorry, I ended up ranting there, but I
Oh,
think you
dude,
get
it's
it.
all good. Hey, one question. So I guess you kind of answered this and
Yeah.
maybe you did, but about so before again you got into Bitcoin, was there a kind of a defining moment for you that really opened you to this like world of Bitcoin? I mean, I'm if I had to guess right now, maybe Ron Paul or someone, but
Yeah.
yeah, just curious, was there a moment where you were just like, yeah, something's definitely wrong?
Honestly, it was that Peter Schiff was right video was
Mm,
like,
that was
again,
it?
Peter Schiff has his problems with Bitcoin now. He refuses to understand it for whatever reason. We don't speculate on that right now. But his video at that time, in that moment, was eye-opening to me and sent me down a completely different path than I would have been on otherwise. So that was the starting point. Watching actually Peter Schiff's video blogs, again, circa 2008, circa 2009, they were incredible. This man could just sit in front of a camera and rant for 10 to 15 minutes. He would do this a couple times a week about random economic topic or random economic current event. And I'd watch it and I'd be like, oh my God, he speaks with such clarity and understanding of what's happening. And I can actually, like, I can digest this. I've read economic textbooks. They made no sense. Like, I mean, they made some sense, but like you couldn't actually apply them in reality. It was all theory. It doesn't actually work in reality. Schiff was able to make economics relatable in reality. And so I was a sponge for that. And as a result of following him, again, I found the Ron Pauls of the world. I found the Tom Woods of the world or Thomas Sowells of the world, Bob Murphy, right? There's so many great Austrian economists and modern and classic um, that have so much to teach us and that has great insights into how the world works and why it works, especially through the economic lens. So yeah, that was the moment. Like
What's your
that
best
was
guess as to why Peter still hasn't seen the light? Is he just too
incentive.
invested in gold?
Yeah, he's built this whole image and business around gold, and so he can't be seen to be to embrace Bitcoin is to disavow gold. And he can't, like, for the sake of his entire business and reputation and career, there's too much invested. He's pot committed to gold, so he can't disavow gold. That's what I think it
For what
is.
it's worth, I actually met his nephew in Singapore, I think, a couple months ago. And he's also, his family's big into gold. They've got a big gold business. But he was surprisingly very much pro Bitcoin. He seemed to really get it. So maybe it's a generational thing, maybe not. So I guess okay, so you're going down this kind of journey. I would really be interested in having someone like kind of triangulate those data points like the Occupy Wall Street, Ron Paul, Peter Schiff, because I'd be pretty convinced that like there's an outsized number of people that got in, back in those days, and we probably all followed the same breadcrumbs, you know?
There's no question that Bitcoiners that were minted between 2009 and I don't know 2017. Like I'm at the tail end of that, I think. But especially the Bitcoiners minted from like 2009 to 2013 or 2015. Those guys, I think, very strongly were orange pilled by those events.
So to go from Peter Schiff though to and then Ron Paul world to Bitcoin is a bit of a journey, right? So how did you start? You just discover it on YouTube one day or on Twitter? Did you a
I
friend?
well, I mean, I heard about Bitcoin, whether it was probably, I'll attribute it to Max Kaiser more than anything on his old show on
Mm.
RT. Max Kaiser, but also Zero Hedge. I used to read a bunch.
Hmm.
And they talked about it. And this is when it was trading at 50 cents or a dollar or $2. And I wanted to buy it then. I didn't buy it. Saw it go to like 50 bucks and I thought, okay, I missed the boat. And I sort of just put it in the back of my mind. That's, way back when in 2010, 2011. So I never bought any back then, even though I kind of wanted to for a minute there. And I was very seriously thinking about it, but I realized I'm an idiot. I'm a banker. How will I even hold this thing? I don't know anything about technology. And there's no cold cards that exist at the time. There's no Sparrow wallets and these great softwares and apps that exist at that time. It was all much more rudimentary then.
So then
Uh,
take us through your journey. When did you finally like kind of sink your teeth into it?
yeah. So basically, at the very end of 2016, I was still working my last corporate job. I was a market research consultant focused on customer experience. So if you ever get those surveys like, how likely are you to recommend our company? And what do you think of this product and that product on a scale of 1 to 10? And how likely are you to da, da, da? I ran that for one of Canada's largest insurance companies. Like I was a consultant that worked with one of Canada's largest insurance companies and ran their whole program, international program for 2 years. So I was out for lunch, just out from the office on my own, and I bumped into an old acquaintance who I won't say his name on the show, but we can talk after. You might know him. Hey man, like, what's doing? What are you into these days? And he goes, "Oh man, Bitcoin, like Ethereum. Ethereum is the most undervalued resource in the world. This thing is gonna go." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know much about Ethereum. I remember learning a little bit about Bitcoin way back when, and I keep hearing about this blockchain thing." So again, this is the end of 2016. Um, and basically, we ended up having a long conversation at lunch. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to follow up and maybe I'll buy a little bit. I'll dip my toe into this. So in the very beginning of 2017, I finally managed to get money onto an exchange. He showed me how to set up a wallet. He told me to buy a Trezor, which I did at the time. So I actually ended up with a cold storage wallet like from the jump, which proved to be very useful. Um, and basically started buying Ether, started buying some Bitcoin, ended up buying I had like 25 different coins and ICOs. I had a whole spreadsheet of all these nonsense coins and oh, we're gonna decentralize this and decentralize that. Made a little bit of money, lost a bunch of money. Basically by mid or early 2018, by like the end of Q1 2018, I sold everything and just rolled it all into Bitcoin. I took a bath on like 23 or 24 out of 25 coins. Because I held the bag like a dum dum, not understanding why Bitcoin was the only thing that was going to make a difference and be valuable going forward, and falling for the scams of all these coins and all these promises, these empty promises of these other coins. Um, but yeah, it was this friend who sort of got me going, and basically he got me started. I had just finished reading, or was just about to read, a book about blockchain at the time. I had my understanding of money from years back. And then once I was getting my hands dirty, actually sending and receiving coins, reading about the technology, and having my understanding of money, I managed to sort of put all three of those elements together to come up with a clear understanding on my own terms of what Bitcoin is and why it matters. And once the light bulb went off, that's when I had that like, okay, I got to just get it all out of, I had a bunch of ETH, get it all out of ETH. I sold ETH at like the bottom for Bitcoin. Like if I had held, I would have made a lot more money, but I slept a lot better at night holding Bitcoin than I did holding ETH. So I rolled it all into Bitcoin and became a Bitcoin maximalist in, early 2018. And the rest is history.
The visual that I get when people tell me that, because that's another thing, right? Like a lot of people get into Bitcoin by first getting into Doge or Ether or fill in the blank.
Yep.
But the visual I get when I hear that is like the remember that show American Gladiators?
Of course.
It's like this tiny little guy or girl. He's trying to make it through all these like
The gauntlet.
behemoths.
Yeah.
Yeah. The gauntlet,
I
right?
mean, it's true. It's totally true that, there's a lot of people who became Bitcoin maximalists because they had to get burned by the shitcoin industry first to understand, like, Bitcoin's value proposition in a vacuum isn't necessarily clear. You have to give it context. And whether it's a good understanding of fiat or whether it's getting burned by the shitcoin world, you gain context that makes Bitcoin more apparent.
So true, so true. So can you maybe shed a little bit of light in terms of so you get into crypto and then you get into Bitcoin or then you finally realize that Bitcoin's going to help you optimize sleep at night, which is
Among
probably
other
a pretty
things. Yeah.
good an indicator. But were there other things like were you just kind of like just more I don't know getting orange pilled because of the maxis and watching like the Breed Love podcast and all this and you're kind of like okay. I get it. It's limited. It's or were you still just like kind of, copying other people and being like, yeah, I think were you like, how deep did it go for you at that time?
Yeah, it's not that I wouldn't say I was copying other people. I was learning from other people, right? The Francis
Mm,
Pouliots of the world,
Francis.
the Bitcoin maximalists, right? Full Bitcoin, amazing company. Um, like I learned a lot. Pierre Richard, Michael Goldstein, right? Like I followed all these guys
Mm,
on Twitter, and I learned a lot by following these guys and gaining from their insights, right? Like they would just say things on Twitter, and the guys that aren't on Twitter now, like Gigi, right? You can only find him on Noster now. And they're, that's just one example. But like there were guys posting very valuable insights and information and providing lessons on, Bitcoin is sort of the root, and then you have all these other branches that extend from it, whether it goes into health and wellness and diet and school education and work and just everything, just life in general. It all extends from, Bitcoin is money, right? Money, as I sort of wrote in my book, it or I forget if I use this term exactly, but like money is the grease that that greases the wheels of economy, right? If you have bad money, you have gunk in the gears and they don't turn properly and things are off balance. But if you have a good, smooth, well-oiled machine, then things run smoothly and efficiently. And that's sort of what Bitcoin is to me. Um, is it makes things more efficient and more effective. And when I say things, it's not just number go up, the value of Bitcoin going up. It's there are so many incredible offshoots that come from a good functioning money. If you have bad money, you have bad social outcomes. Long story short, bad money, bad social outcomes. If you have good, honest, sound money, you will have good social outcomes, or more like the probability of better social outcomes is far higher. And there's a direct connection between money and the outcomes we see in the world. And the fact that Bitcoin keeps going up, it is literally changing the trajectory of the outcomes of the world because it is empowering the people who are walking away from the corporate jobs and the corporate jobs and the government jobs and the salary jobs that, make us do these things because we sort of need their money, and we're contributing to this machine that is taking us in the wrong direction. But if we're slowly walking away from that, we're rug pulling the fiat machine, and now we are becoming masters of our own domain and deciding our own future. And like increasingly, that is happening as a result of Bitcoin. More Bitcoiners are walking away from the fiat mentality and choosing a different life that is more self-determined. And as a result, they are making better choices, I think. And so that is literally changing the world
beautiful.
from the bottom up.
Agreed, 100%. Hey, Jesse, so the name of this show is Building on Bitcoin, right? So
Yeah.
now you're at this stage, 2018-ish, you're orange pilled, you're like, this is it, this is the future. You go from there to now like author, you're mentoring people on how to use cold cards. Like how do you make that leap? I'm sure it wasn't easy.
No, I mean, it wasn't a smooth process to figure out, and I still haven't totally figured out what I'm doing with my life or anything. But I'm very happy with where I'm at. I'm in a very
Good.
good spot right now. Um, yeah, writing the book was an offshoot of me realizing that, okay, Bitcoin is the thing that people just don't understand and they need to know about to improve their lives. So I wanted to explain it to people. And so that manifested in the book. And then I don't know what would have happened from the time of publishing to now had COVID not happened, right? Like COVID threw a big wrench into life in many different facets and ways. Um, and, I didn't go on a traditional book tour because everything was like closed down. I was doing my book tour was a bunch of Zoom calls on podcasts, which was helpful to a degree, but probably not what it could have been. And I'm very grateful to obviously to all the podcasters who I spoke to and met and networked with, because some of them are now, good, I consider friends and good friends. Um, but basically, COVID threw me off from whatever trajectory I might have been going on. It threw me off. I ended up focusing a lot on COVID, as you well know, and becoming a critic of a lot of what happened there. And we don't have to spend too much time going into that, but I became a harsh critic of that. That took me down the road of sort of healthcare, pharmaceutical industry, learning a lot more about that than I ever thought I would have. And I have a lot of opinions and arguments and facts and insights into that world that I never would have gotten otherwise. But anyway,
Is
you're
it
on
bar
mute again.
was it barbecue Bitcoin? What was the name of that famous article you
Oh,
wrote?
yeah.
We don't have to go into it, but I mean, it
Yeah.
was
So I
epic.
wrote
Yeah.
I wrote a blog in
Not
May
Bitcoin.
20
Yeah.
in May 2021, or pardon me, in March 2021, called "Risk It for the Brisket,"
Risk
which
it for
it's
the
now.
brisket.
Yeah, it's now on Substack because Medium blocked me for being
Okay.
too controversial. I don't know. So Risk It for the Brisket, I have on Jaber J's is my Substack. Um, yeah, basically this restaurateur in Toronto there was the initial lockdown in spring 2020 when no one knew what was happening. And then we locked down again after the summer in fall 2020. And he was like, no, 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 no. We locked down to like get ready. Like if we're locking down again, then we didn't get ready. And if we didn't get ready, then like what are we missing? Something's wrong. And so he decided to make a stand and that caught my attention for a whole bunch of reasons. And I just followed his story along and followed the breadcrumbs that he was laying down, basically, and became very critical of everything that was happening because I started learning about things. Again, Bitcoin gave me the power to, or I
Mm,
should say, empowered me to think for myself and be critical and be willing to challenge, existing dogma and speak truth to power.
beautiful.
Um,
Yeah.
so I had the time, the resources, the ability, the skills to follow along and say what aren't we being told and what's wrong and actually genuinely ask, not only ask what's wrong with this picture, but then try to figure out what the answer is because no one wants to tell me. Anyway, so wrote that article. I've been following his story ever since. I'm hoping that one day there will be more to tell on that, and that's, a story for another podcast.
Yeah.
But that took me on a detour. And then eventually, right, the Freedom Convoy in Canada, the trucker convoy, which was amazing. And one of my biggest regrets, I think, ever is that I didn't go to Ottawa that first weekend with you. um, because by all accounts, that was magical. Um, I
I'm gonna
really,
put together like a ginormous documentary when, the dust settles a bit. I have literally like 50 hours of video from that weekend and took my little ones down there. I always describe it as like Canada Day times like 1,000. It was electric, to say
like
the least.
COVID in Canada was one of the hardest hit countries in terms of government mandates and restrictions and measures and lockdowns. And the Freedom Convoy was so inspirational and uplifting and hopeful, and I will forever be grateful for what they did for Canadians.
I've
Um,
got heebie-jeebies. I've got like,
yeah.
yeah, I'm feeling the tingles. But I want to take that and run with it a bit. So Trump.
Okay, we got to go down this one.
Okay, so
Okay.
he's claiming he's gonna put Bitcoin on the strategic reserve asset, books or whatever of the United States government. In my view, this is ginormous, right? If back in 2011, 2012, if you would ask me when I went full time into Bitcoin, what is the most bullish outcome you could, potentially project into the future? Well, the United States government saying it's gonna, hold Bitcoin, perhaps like money printer go burr right into huge. It's now kind of well documented that perhaps it was RFK's orange pilling, right? Him coming to the Vegas conference the year before and talking about how he's going to buy 4 million Bitcoin and do something like what Trump's suggesting now. And then you could argue that RFK was orange pilled by the Canadian truckers, right? Because he
Yep. Yeah,
famously
I've heard him
talks
say
about
that.
so all roads go back to the Canadian truckers, right? And so even the risk it for the brisket and the Trump, all of it's like we're all on this tiny little blue dot at the end of the day, right? So I mean,
Yes.
it's all kind of somewhat connected. But I just thought I'd throw that out there, that commentary. I just love, and it makes me very proud to be, because it's hard to be proud to be a Canadian sometimes, right? Like, oh, 51st state, and people make fun of you, China and this and that. But
Venezuela. Yeah.
no, man, like we've got balls of steel. I mean, there are people who maybe don't go on social media, maybe they're not making a big, noise about every little thing, but we have
I,
people that are like hard workers that are just and most of all that are courageous.
I heard someone use the analogy, Canadians, we had put up with a lot during COVID. And basically, the truckers, the Freedom Convoy, was sort of the uncle who'd been sitting on the couch, and it's a big family, meeting or dinner or event or whatever, and he's just sort of quietly on the couch having a beer or whatever, and the kids are making noise and playing or whatever, and finally they start to get a little too rowdy, and the uncle just sits up and stomps his foot, and it's like enough is enough, and just that's it. That was the Freedom Convoy. It was the uncle on the couch who just got up and put his foot down and said, "No, these shenanigans are over now. Like, you guys settle down. We're at a big family event. Everyone's here to have a good time. Stop, horsing around. The cousins are pushing each other or whatever. Like, no, 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 no more of this nonsense. We're done with this. Everyone's going to behave now." And it was just this imposing figure that, okay, you know what? Yeah, I don't want to piss off the uncle. He's a big, strong guy. Like we don't want to piss him off. Um,
And it was that was the catalyst. Oh, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
yeah,
Continue.
so that's the analogy for what the
I like
freedom
it. I
convoy
like
was.
it.
He's always been there. He was always on the couch. It was just finally, you know what? They just it was the straw that broke the camel's back. They got too rambunctious, and finally he had to get up and put his foot down.
Yes.
So they
Yes.
do exist, as you were saying. Sorry to finish that. Um, there are amazing Canadians out there. Canadian Bitcoiners. Like there is a very strong contingent of Canadian Bitcoiners, principal Bitcoiners, who are building incredible things. From again the guys at Bull Bitcoin to NVK at CoinKite.
Talk about the nunchuck thing. Like, remember the whole
Oh,
trucker thing?
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think
So
just like, it's such a good story.
so basically, um, people tried to send dollars to the truckers via GoFundMe, and that got frozen by the government. And then they tried to send using Give, Send, Go, and that got frozen by the government. So finally, a number of Canadians, including BTC Sessions, um, started a Bitcoin fund because we knew that couldn't be seized, and they had to orchestrate very quickly, how to collect and distribute that money. Um, and I forget how exactly Nunchuck was involved. It was probably the multi-sig wallet, if I had to guess, that was involved with collecting some of the funds. But basically, the Canadian government, I think it was the Ontario Superior Court actually, emailed Nunchuck or contacted Nunchuck and said, hey, freeze the addresses of the people who donated to the convoy. And Nunchuck wrote a letter back saying, hi, Ontario Superior Court. Clearly, you don't understand what the hell is happening here. I'm paraphrasing. This isn't exactly what they said, but this is the spirit of what they said. Clearly, you do not understand what's happening here. We are a software provider. We do not collect, we have no knowledge of people's addresses. We have no ability to freeze their assets. We only have email addresses. This is all by design. That was my favorite 4 words in, or 5 words, or 4. This is all by design. Yeah, 5 words. That was my favorite line in their letter. They go, "This is by design. We, you need to learn how public-private key cryptography works. And when you do, you can contact us and we will help you understand and use Bitcoin too, because the Canadian dollar is going to fail." Like that's basically what they wrote back to the Ontario Superior Court. Like basically, we can't help you because the system is designed such that there is nothing we can do to help you. We have zero tools at our disposal to help you identify people or freeze their assets. So,
I heard
tough
Francis
shit.
recently on an interview on YouTube or something talk about how that incident, like the nunchuck, the lady single mom getting her bank account like that was arguably the
Oh,
most biggest like advertisement marketing campaign for Bitcoin ever. In India, we saw something similar when in 20, I forget, 16, 17, when the government demonetized the two top currencies in India. And again, Bitcoin kind of, took off during that time. And so what's that famous quote? First they ignore you.
first,
What is it? What is it?
yeah, it's
Ignore
like
you,
first they
then they
ignore you, then they
no.
laugh at you,
Then they
then they
fight,
attack,
then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and
and
then you
then you
win,
win.
right?
Yeah.
So where are we in that? Are we
I
winning
mean,
yet?
it's like we're halfway between fighting and winning, maybe, because they did fight us, and now, like you said, the Trump administration is doing some things, right? They seem to be more, not seem to be, they certainly are more friendly to Bitcoin and the whole crypto shenanigans as a whole, but we care about Bitcoin. So they are more friendly towards Bitcoin. They are making it easier to use Bitcoin. They are trying not to get in the way. I don't have all the ins and outs of the policies and what's good and what's bad, and I'm not an expert in any of that, field. Um, but so we're graduating from fighting to winning. And when we win, and doesn't feel like it's an if, it feels like it's a when. When we win, there's going to be a lot of people crying very hard over, their fiat fortunes and their fiat um, endeavors that were pointless and fruitless and unproductive and ineffective, but that they worked so hard on to be, because they were sucking at the teat of the fiat machine. And, it'll be a beautiful thing when the people who are actually being productive and effective and efficient start to have more purchasing power, have more time, have more resources, and they can direct the direction of the world, because they have these things that fiat is losing. Like it's just bleeding into us, right? Like we're siphoning their purchasing power and their time from them over to our side, and we can use it for more productive endeavors. So that's where we're getting close to being at the winning stage.
My,
I
my,
hope we're
my,
getting. I'll knock on wood here. It feels like we're getting close.
yeah. Um, uh, one of my favorite quotes is all roads lead to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And, whereas many Bitcoiners have this like visceral kind of negative reaction towards crypto or even governments or BlackRock or whatever, I don't. I see many of our global challenges as systemic. I see
Yeah.
as our money system being fundamentally flawed. And I almost don't blame, I mean, even what Carl Schwab, right? He retired or died or something this week. And so I don't see these old guards as like maybe even, maliciously trying to come after us. I see it as just upgrade. Like we're moving into Earth 2.0, and so maybe we got a few minutes left. Bring us home, land the plane, juxtapose what we were going through 5 years ago, my Bitcoin brother, to what we're going through today, MicroStrategy, BlackRock, nation state adoption, and like you said, on the on the verge of winning.
Yeah, the Klaus Schwabs and the Justin Trudeaus and the Mark Carneys of the world, they are a symptom of the disease that is fiat.
Mm.
And like you said, it's not that I blame them for being as spineless and unprincipled and, horrific as they are. Imagine if you're Justin Trudeau and you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth and everywhere you go, people knew your name and you never had to do anything. You were always bailed out if you did wrong. So you would grow up and you always, as prime minister, you're flying around in private jets, all these conferences where everyone's kissing your ass. Like, that's your life. Of course, everything is right according to you because no one's willing to tell you, like, stop doing this, you're wrong, you're hurting people. So of course you're going to keep going on and behaving the way you're behaving. And so there's a whole echelon of people in a sense, right? You could think of it as whether it's the Davos elite or whatever, who again, like this is just their life and it has been for decades. So they don't know any better. And they think in their mind, a lot of them, some of them are, I would have to believe, nefarious, but there's also a bunch that are just naive and don't know any better and are just a product of their environment. And so what is happening is that environment and that incentive system, it's all changing. The ground is shifting beneath their feet. Bitcoin is rumbling, the foundations of their structures, of their castles that they've lived in for decades and centuries. Um, and something new is going to come about as a result of that because the strong foundation they once enjoyed is crumbling, and there's a brand new foundation being built that is even stronger than they had, and it's a much more level playing field than the one they previously built. So again, there a lot of these people have done wrong, and I don't think that they should get off the hook for it. They should face reality and understand what happened, but it's going to be very hard for them to ever understand it, and obviously hard for them to face justice in a shitty system that has been built again around these faulty incentives. So the whole transition, there's no easy way for this to happen. The only thing I take solace in is that the people who are hardworking and visionaries who can see the future, or have an understanding and low time preference and are building for the future for their families, for themselves, and taking action to prepare themselves accordingly. They're the ones who are going to benefit. Whereas the people who are sort of just sucking at the fiat teat and just like insisting that the system stay there, who have benefited excessively from that system, when the rug gets pulled from them, it's hard to feel bad. They've had lots of time to prepare, and if they didn't prepare themselves, it's their own fault, frankly. If you didn't know any better, well, you helped contribute to a faulty education system and knowledge system, and we're all, things are going to change. People are going to learn the hard way. I wish it would be easy. Bitcoin is going to help ease the transition because there are a lot of people that would have been hurt otherwise who are helping themselves out, and they will be there to help others because Bitcoin is a rising tide that lifts all boats. Like I very much believe Bitcoin is a rising tide that lifts all boats, and it's going to cushion the blow of the traditional financial collapse that might have happened without Bitcoin there in the background. So I think the future is very bright. There's nothing smooth about necessarily what's coming, but there's reason to be optimistic, and Bitcoin is chief reason among that.
Amazing. All right, let's bring this one to a close. Happy to do it again whenever you're free. This was amazing. And I'll leave everyone with this is that there's a lot of really smart people out there. But if there's one thing that's in more short supply than Bitcoin, it's courage. And so, Jesse, you are one of the most courageous people I've ever met. Thank you for rescuing me from the COVID hysteria and yeah, and being in the trenches with all of us here in the Bitcoin world. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for saying that.
All right.
It was my pleasure, buddy.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna bring this one to a